The small village of Darpur woke to the sound of weeping that morning. The news had spread quickly from house to house like a sad whisper on the wind. Fatima Begum, beloved by all who knew her, had passed away after months of fighting an illness that had slowly drained the life from her once vibrant body. No one felt this loss more deeply than her 7-year-old son, Amir Hassan. When his father, Khalid, had gently shaken him awake before dawn with reddened eyes and told him that his mother had gone to heaven, Amir had simply stared back, unable to understand what those words truly meant. It wasn't until he saw his mother's body, wrapped in a white cloth in their front room, that reality began to sink in. "Can I touch her?" he had asked in a voice so small that his father had to lean down to hear him. Khalid nodded, his own grief making it impossible to speak. Amir reached out with a trembling hand and felt the cool skin of his mother's forehead. Just yesterday, he had placed a wet cloth there to help with her fever. Just yesterday, she had smiled at him weakly and told him to be a good boy. By mid-morning, neighbors and relatives had begun to gather in their modest brick home. The women moved efficiently, preparing the body for burial according to tradition. The men stood in small groups, speaking in hushed tones about what a fine woman Fatima had been, and how tragic it was for a child so young to lose his mother. Amir watched it all with wide, dry eyes. He hadn't cried yet. Something inside him refused to believe that this was real. His mother couldn't be gone. She had promised to see him finish school. She had promised to be there when he became someone important. The wooden coffin arrived before noon. Amir watched as they placed his mother's wrapped body inside. Something shifted in his chest then, a feeling of panic rising like floodwater. "Where are you taking her?" he asked his aunt Nadia, who had been trying to keep him occupied with sweet tea and biscuits. "To the mosque first, then to the cemetery," she explained gently. "It's what happens when someone dies, Amir. We must return them to the earth." "No," Amir said simply, moving past her to stand beside the coffin. "She's not going anywhere." Nadia exchanged concerned glances with Khalid, who was accepting condolences from a stream of villagers. Amir's father looked utterly lost, a ship without an anchor in stormy seas. He had loved Fatima since they were teenagers, and now half of himself was gone. "Amir, come have something to eat," Nadia tried again, placing a hand on the boy's thin shoulder. But Amir shook his head stubbornly, his small fingers gripping the edge of the wooden box. As the day wore on, more people arrived. The tiny house filled with bodies and voices, and the heavy scent of grief. Women prepared food in the kitchen, children played quietly in the yard, and men discussed practical matters like funeral costs and who would help Khalid with the boy now. Through it all, Amir remained fixed in place, as if his small body had grown roots beside his mother's coffin. "The boy hasn't moved for hours," Nadia told her husband, worry creasing her brow. "He won't eat or drink, he just stands there." "He's in shock," her husband replied. "Give him time. Grief takes different paths for different hearts." By evening, when the visitors began to leave with promises to return for the funeral prayers the next day, Amir still hadn't budged. His father, exhausted by sorrow and the endless stream of visitors, finally noticed his son's vigil. "Amir," Khalid said, kneeling beside him. "You must rest now. Tomorrow will be a long day." Amir turned to look at his father, truly seeing him for the first time that day. Khalid's face was drawn with fatigue, his eyes red-rimmed and swollen. "I can't leave her alone," Amir whispered. "She doesn't like to be alone in the dark." The words pierced Khalid's heart like a knife. It was true. Fatima had always kept a small lamp burning at night. "What if the light goes out when I'm sleeping?" she would joke, though they both knew her fear of darkness was real. "Your mother isn't afraid anymore," Khalid tried to explain, his voice breaking. "She's at peace now." But Amir shook his head firmly. "She told me to stay close. She made me promise." Khalid was too weary to argue. Perhaps it was better to let the boy work through his grief in his own way. "You can sleep next to the coffin if you wish," he finally said. "I'll bring your blanket." As night fell over the village, most homes turned dark, but lights remained on in the Hassan house. Khalid sat in a chair across the room, watching his son who had finally settled on the floor beside the coffin, wrapped in his favorite blanket that still carried the faint scent of his mother's homemade soap. "Did she say anything to you?" Khalid asked suddenly. "At the end?" Amir looked up at his father, his eyes serious in his small face. "She said I must be brave. She said she left something for me." He paused, brow furrowing with concentration. "She said I would know when the time was right." Khalid nodded slowly. That sounded like Fatima, always thinking ahead, always planning. Even in her final days, her thoughts had been for her son. "Did she say what it was?" "No," Amir replied, his hand resting protectively against the wood of the coffin. "But she said it was important. She made me promise to find it." Khalid felt a fresh wave of tears threaten to overwhelm him. He didn't know what Fatima might have meant, but he understood now why Amir refused to leave her side. The boy was waiting, watching, believing in his mother's final words. Through the night, Khalid drifted in and out of restless sleep. But Amir remained awake, his eyes fixed on the coffin as if expecting it to reveal a secret at any moment. By morning, dark circles had formed under the boy's eyes, but still he refused to move. News of Amir's behavior spread through the village as quickly as the news of Fatima's death had. People arrived for the funeral prayers with curious glances, for the small boy who wouldn't leave his mother's side. "It isn't healthy," some whispered. "The child needs to accept what has happened." "He's just a boy," others defended. "Let him grieve in his own way." Imam Baksh, the elderly religious leader, who had known Amir since birth, approached the boy with gentle concern. "Your mother's soul has already begun its journey, young one," he explained kindly. "This body is just a shell now. The prayers we say help her soul find peace." Amir listened politely, as his mother had taught him to respect elders, but his resolve remained unshaken. "I made a promise," was all he would say. The funeral prayers were held in the courtyard, with the coffin placed on a simple wooden platform. Tradition called for women to stay at home while men performed the prayers, but no one had the heart to remove Amir from his post. He stood silent beside the coffin, his small frame dwarfed by the crowd of men who had gathered to pay their respects. When the prayers were finished, it was time to take Fatima's body to the cemetery. This was the moment everyone had been dreading. How would they convince the boy to let his mother go? Khalid knelt beside his son once more. "Amir," he said gently, "it's time to say goodbye now. We must take your mother to her final resting place." Amir looked up at his father, his eyes suddenly filling with tears for the first time since his mother's death. "She said I would know when the time was right," he repeated desperately. "But I don't know yet. I don't know what she meant." Khalid felt his own tears start again. He pulled his son into his arms, feeling the small body shake with sobs that had been held back for too long. "We'll figure it out together," he promised. "Whatever your mother left for you, we'll find it. But now we must follow our traditions. We must let her body rest." Amir clung to his father, his face buried against Khalid's shoulder. "Can I have one more minute with her?" he asked, his voice muffled. Khalid nodded, and the gathered men stepped back respectfully, giving the boy space for a final goodbye. Amir turned back to the coffin, placing both hands on the wood. "I'll find it, Mama," he whispered. "I promise. I won't forget." Then he stepped back, allowing his uncle and the other men to lift the coffin. As they carried Fatima's body out of the house, Amir followed close behind, his eyes never leaving the wooden box that contained his mother. He walked the entire way to the cemetery, refusing rides from well-meaning relatives, determined to stay with his mother until the very end. No one in Darpur would soon forget the sight of the small boy walking steadfastly behind his mother's coffin, his back straight despite the weight of grief on his young shoulders, and no one could have guessed what would happen when they finally reached the cemetery, or how Amir's promise to his mother would change not only his life, but the lives of everyone in their small village. Little did they know, This was just the beginning of a remarkable story that would spread far beyond the boundaries of their community. The cemetery sat on a gentle hill overlooking Darpur village. Ancient trees with gnarled trunks provided patches of shade across the grounds where generations of villagers had been laid to rest. As the funeral procession arrived with Fatima's coffin, Amir felt a cool breeze brush against his tear-stained face. It reminded him of how his mother would fan him during hot summer nights when electricity failed in their village. The grave had been prepared earlier that morning, a rectangular hole in the earth that seemed both too small and too vast to contain his mother. Amir watched with unwavering attention as the men carefully lowered the wooden coffin. His father stood beside him, one hand resting heavily on Amir's shoulder, as if drawing strength from his son even as he tried to provide it. "Dust to dust," Imam Baksh intoned, his weathered hands scattering the first soil onto the coffin. "We return to the earth from which we came." Each soft thud of dirt hitting wood made Amir flinch. When it was his turn to throw a handful of soil, he hesitated, his small fingers clutching the damp earth tightly. "It's our way of saying goodbye," his father whispered. Amir nodded, but couldn't bring himself to let go. Instead, he knelt and placed his handful of soil gently at the edge of the grave. "I'm not saying goodbye," he said quietly. "I'm just saying goodnight." The gathered villagers exchanged glances of concern and sympathy. Some of the women wiped fresh tears from their eyes, moved by the boy's words. Even Imam Baksh, who had presided over countless funerals in his long life, felt his throat tighten with emotion. When the grave was filled and prayers were complete, people began to disperse. Relatives patted Amir's head or squeezed his shoulder as they passed, offering words of comfort that washed over him like water over stone. His Aunt Nadia tried to coax him back to the house, where food waited for the mourners, but Amir refused to move. "I need to stay a little longer," he insisted, his voice soft but determined. Khalid, recognizing the same stubbornness that had kept his son by the coffin for hours, nodded tiredly. "We'll wait for you at home," he told Amir. "Don't stay too long. The sun will set soon." As the cemetery emptied, Amir sat cross-legged beside the fresh mound of earth. The afternoon sun cast long shadows from the headstones across the ground. In the distance he could see farmers working in their fields and children playing near the stream that ran through the village. Life continuing as if nothing had changed, even though for Amir, everything had. "I don't understand, Mama," he whispered, to the grave. "What did you leave for me? Where am I supposed to look?" Only the gentle rustle of leaves answered him. Amir closed his eyes, trying to remember his mother's exact words during their last private conversation. She had been so weak then, her voice barely audible as she beckoned him close. "I've left something for you," she had said, her breath warm against his ear. "Something to help you when I'm gone. You'll know when the time is right. Promise me you'll find it." He had promised without hesitation, not fully understanding what she meant, but knowing it was important to her. Now, sitting beside her grave, the weight of that promise felt heavier than ever. As the shadows lengthened, Amir finally stood up, brushing the dirt from his clothes. He touched the mound of earth one last time. "I'll come back tomorrow," he promised, then turned and made his way down the hill toward home. The Hassan household was filled with people when Amir returned. Neighbors had brought food, as was customary during times of mourning. Women busied themselves in the kitchen while men sat in the front room, discussing village matters in subdued voices. Children played quietly in the yard, occasionally glancing at Amir with curious eyes as he slipped past them. Amir found his father sitting with his uncles accepting condolences from late-arriving visitors. Khalid looked up as his son entered, relief washing over his tired face. "Come, eat something," he said, making space beside him on the floor mat. Amir wasn't hungry, but he knew his father would worry if he refused. He accepted a plate of rice and lentils from his aunt and ate mechanically, barely tasting the food. His mind was still at the cemetery, still trying to solve the puzzle his mother had left behind. That night, as the house finally emptied of visitors, and an exhausted quiet settled over the rooms. Amir lay on his sleeping mat, staring at the ceiling. The space beside him, where his mother's mat should have been, gaped like an open wound. From the next room he could hear his father's muffled sobs. Sleep eluded him. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his mother's face, heard her voice telling him about the mysterious thing she had left. What could it be? Where should he look? The questions chased each other around his mind until dawn began to lighten the sky outside his window. As soon as it was light enough, Amir slipped out of bed. His father was still sleeping. The lines of grief etched deeply into his face even in repose. Amir moved quietly through the house, stopping in the front room where his mother's coffin had rested. He knelt on the floor, running his hands over the space, not sure what he was looking for, but compelled to search nonetheless. Nothing. He moved to his parents' bedroom next, carefully opening his mother's wooden chest, where she kept her few precious possessions, her wedding clothes, some jewelry passed down from her mother, old photographs. He examined each item carefully, looking for any sign, any clue. Again, nothing unusual caught his eye. For 3 days, this became Amir's routine. He would visit his mother's grave in the morning, talking to her as if she could hear him, asking for guidance. Then he would return home and systematically search every corner of their small house while his father was busy receiving visitors or tending to necessary tasks. By the 3rd day, villagers had begun to whisper about Amir's behavior. Some thought grief had affected his mind. Others suggested more troubling explanations. "The boy is possessed by a spirit," an elderly woman declared as she watched Amir walking back from the cemetery. "Look at his eyes. Too serious for a child, and he barely speaks anymore." "Nonsense," Nadia defended her nephew fiercely. "He's just a child trying to make sense of his loss." But even Nadia grew concerned when she found Amir in the storage shed behind their house, methodically emptying old containers and peering into dark corners. "What are you looking for, Amir?" she asked gently. "Something Mama left for me," he replied, not looking up from his task. "Your mother didn't leave anything behind except her love," Nadia said, trying to be kind. "Sometimes when people are very sick, they say things that don't make sense." Amir turned to face her then, his young face surprisingly calm. "She meant it," he said with absolute certainty. "My mother never said things she didn't mean." Nadia had no response to that. It was true. Fatima had always been a straightforward woman, not given to idle talk or false promises. Word of Amir's quest reached Dr. Rahim, who had treated Fatima during her illness. On the afternoon of the 3rd day after the funeral, he stopped by the Hassan home, ostensibly to check on Khalid but really to observe Amir. He found the boy sitting on the front step, his chin resting on his knees as he stared thoughtfully at the road. "Hello, Amir," Dr. Rahim greeted him, sitting down beside him. "How are you feeling?" Amir considered the question seriously. "I miss my mother," he said finally, "and I can't find what she left for me." Dr. Rahim nodded sympathetically. "Your Aunt Nadia mentioned that. Can you tell me more about it? What exactly did your mother say to you?" Amir recounted the conversation as accurately as he could remember. As he spoke, Dr. Rahim listened attentively, noting the boy's clear recollection and unwavering belief. "Did your mother ever mention anything specific during her treatment?" Amir asked hopefully. "Did she ask you to give me something?" Dr. Rahim shook his head. "Not directly, no, but—" He paused, remembering something. "The last time I visited her, about a week before she passed, she did ask for pen and paper. She was too weak to sit up, but she insisted on writing something. I assumed it was a prayer or final wishes." Amir's eyes widened. "What happened to the paper?" "I left it with her," Dr. Rahim replied. "I don't know what became of it after that." A new determination filled Amir. If his mother had written something, it could be the clue he needed. But where would she have hidden it? That evening, as Amir helped his father prepare a simple dinner, he broached the subject carefully. "Baba, did Mama leave any notes or letters before she died?" Khalid looked surprised by the question. "Not that I know of." "Why do you ask?" Dr. Rahim said she wrote something during his last visit. I thought maybe it was for me. Khalid's expression softened. If I find anything like that, I'll give it to you right away. But Amir, you must prepare yourself for the possibility that there might not be anything to find. Amir nodded, but in his heart, he remained convinced. His mother had made a promise, and somewhere, somehow, she had left him the gift she spoke of. He just had to be patient enough to discover it. That night, as Amir finally drifted toward sleep, a memory surfaced, his mother asking him to bring her sewing box the day before she died. He had thought nothing of it at the time, assuming she wanted to mend something. But now he wondered, could that be where she had hidden her message? Tomorrow, he decided, as sleep claimed him at last. Tomorrow he would check the sewing box, and maybe, just maybe, he would finally discover what his mother had left behind. Morning arrived with the gentle cooing of doves outside Amir's window. He woke instantly, the memory of his late-night realization still fresh in his mind. The sewing box. That had to be where his mother had hidden whatever she wanted him to find. He dressed quickly, eager to begin his search. The house was quiet. His father had taken to rising before dawn and sitting in the yard with his tea, finding solace in the peaceful moments before the village stirred to life. Amir slipped past him with a quick greeting, not wanting to raise hopes in case this lead also went nowhere. His mother's sewing box was kept on the highest shelf in their small storage room, out of reach of curious children. Amir dragged a wooden stool beneath the shelf and climbed up carefully. The box was a simple wooden container with a hinged lid, painted blue many years ago, the color now faded and chipped. His mother had treasured it nonetheless, often telling Amir that her own mother had used the same box. Standing on tiptoes, Amir managed to grasp the edge of the box and slide it toward him. It was heavier than he expected, and for a heart-stopping moment he nearly lost his balance. Clutching the precious box to his chest, he climbed down from the stool and sat cross-legged on the floor. His hands trembled slightly as he opened the lid. Inside lay his mother's sewing supplies, needles stuck into a small cushion, spools of thread in various colors, scissors with worn handles, buttons saved from old clothes, and scraps of fabric for patching. Everything exactly as it should be. Or was it? Amir carefully removed each item, laying them out in a neat arrangement on the floor beside him. As he lifted out the fabric scraps at the bottom, his heart jumped. There, hidden beneath everything else, was a small envelope, sealed and with his name written on it in his mother's careful handwriting. Amir. His father's voice from the doorway startled him. "What are you doing?" Amir looked up, the envelope clutched tightly in his hand. "I found it, Baba," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I found what Mama left for me." Khalid crossed the room and knelt beside his son, his eyes fixed on the envelope. Where was it? In her sewing box, under everything else. Amir held it out so his father could see his name written on it. "She wrote it for me." Khalid's eyes filled with tears. "Open it," he encouraged softly. "Let's see what your mother wanted you to know." With great care, Amir broke the seal and opened the envelope. Inside was a folded piece of paper and something else, a small key made of brass tarnished with age. Amir set the key aside and unfolded the letter with reverent hands. "Read it to me?" Khalid asked, his voice catching. Amir nodded and began to read his mother's words aloud. "My dearest Amir, if you are reading this, it means I am no longer with you in body, though my love remains forever. Don't be sad for too long, my brave boy. I have watched you grow these 7 years, and I know the strength that lives inside you. The key with this letter opens the small metal box buried beneath the rose bush I planted the year you were born. Inside you will find what I managed to save for you. Not much by the standards of rich people, but enough to ensure you can continue your schooling. Your father will need help after I'm gone, and he may say your education is too expensive. Show him this letter so he knows my wishes. Amir. You have a clever mind and a kind heart. With these gifts, you can go far beyond our small village. Study hard. Learn everything you can. Make a good life for yourself and for your father. This is my final wish. All my love, Always and forever, your mother. Amir looked up from the letter to find his father weeping openly, one hand pressed against his mouth as if to hold back sobs. Baba, Amir whispered, uncertain. Khalid pulled his son into a tight embrace. Your mother, he managed between breaths, always thinking ahead, always planning. He released Amir and wiped his eyes. She started putting money aside from the day you were born. A few rupees here, a few there. I told her we needed every coin for medicine, but she insisted some be saved for your future. Amir clutched the key tightly. Can we dig it up now? Khalid nodded, rising to his feet. The rose bush by the back wall. It was the first thing she planted when we moved into this house. They walked together to the small garden behind the house. The rose bush stood alone against the mud brick wall, its branches heavy with pink blossoms that filled the air with sweet fragrance. Khalid fetched a small shovel from his toolbox, and together, they began to dig carefully around the base of the plant, taking care not to damage the roots. About a foot down, the shovel hit something solid. Khalid cleared away more dirt, revealing a metal box, roughly the size of a brick. Despite being buried for years, it showed little damage, protected by a covering of oiled cloth that Fatima must have wrapped around it. Amir knelt and brushed the remaining dirt from the box. His hands shook as he inserted the small key into the lock. It turned with a click, and the lid opened easily. Inside, wrapped in a piece of clean cotton cloth, was a stack of banknotes and several pieces of gold jewelry. A thin chain, a pair of small earrings, and 2 bangles. Beneath these was another folded paper, his mother's education fund ledger, where she had recorded every deposit over the years. I had no idea she had saved so much, Khalid murmured, looking at the contents. With astonishment, Amir touched the jewelry gently. These are grandmother's pieces, aren't they? The ones Mama wore on special days? Khalid nodded. Your mother treasured them, for her to leave them to you. He couldn't finish the sentence. News of Amir's discovery spread through the village. By nightfall, neighbors who had been concerned about the boy's strange behavior now marveled at his persistence and faith in his mother's promise. Many came to the Hassan home not to offer condolences this time, but to congratulate Amir on finding his mother's gift. Imam Baksh visited late in the evening, after most others had gone. The elderly religious leader sat with Amir and Khalid, in their front room accepting the tea Amir had prepared. Your mother was a remarkable woman, he told Amir. Not everyone would think so far ahead, especially during such difficult times. Amir nodded solemnly. She always told me that education was the most important thing, that once you have knowledge, no one can take it away from you. Wise words, Imam Baksh agreed. Then, after a thoughtful pause, he addressed Khalid. The school committee met yesterday. We've been discussing ways to help deserving students from families with limited means. Khalid looked up, surprised. The village school only went up to grade 5, after which students had to travel to the larger town 10 kilometers away for further education, an expense many families couldn't afford. We would like to establish a small scholarship fund, Imam Baksh continued, for students who show exceptional promise. Amir would be our first recipient if you agree. Khalid's eyes widened. But why? We haven't asked for... This isn't charity, the Imam interrupted gently. This is an investment in our village's future. Amir has shown remarkable character these past days, and if Fatima believed so strongly in his education, he smiled at the boy. We would be foolish not to support such potential. That night, after Imam Baksh had gone and the house was quiet once more, Amir sat on his bed looking at his mother's letter in the dim light of the oil lamp. He traced her handwriting with his fingertip, feeling closer to her than he had since she fell ill. I found it, Mama, he whispered, just like I promised. From outside his window came the sweet scent of roses on the night breeze. A coincidence, perhaps or maybe, as Amir chose to believe, a sign that his mother had heard him. The next morning, Amir rose early and walked to the cemetery alone. The fresh mound of his mother's grave had settled somewhat, and wildflowers had begun to grow along its edges. He sat beside it, as had become his habit, but today felt different. The desperate sadness that had filled him before had eased, replaced by a bittersweet acceptance. "I'm going to keep studying hard," he told the grave quietly. "I'll make you proud." He placed one of the pink roses from her bush at the head of the grave. "And someday, when I'm older and have learned many things, I'll come back to our village and help other children study too." A gentle wind rustled the leaves of the cemetery trees, sending dappled sunlight dancing across the ground. To Amir, it felt like a response, like his mother's way of telling him she had heard his promise and approved. As he walked back down the hill toward the village, his step was lighter than it had been in months. The weight of his grief hadn't disappeared. He knew it never would completely. But alongside it now was something new, a sense of purpose, a path forward, a way to honor the mother whose love continued to guide him even after she was gone. Indio. The distance, he could see his father standing at their gate, waiting for him. Amir waved and quickened his pace. They had plans to make, a future to build, and a promise to keep. 3 weeks had passed since Amir discovered his mother's hidden gift. Life in the Hassan household had settled into a new rhythm, different from before, marked by the absence they felt every day, but no longer dominated by the raw pain of fresh grief. Amir sat at the small wooden table that served as his desk, carefully copying math problems into his notebook. The village school had reopened after a brief closure for the harvest season, and he had returned with a new sense of purpose. His mother's words echoed in his mind whenever he found the work challenging. "Study hard, learn everything you can." "Amir," his father called from outside. "Someone's here to see you." Curious, Amir set down his pencil and went to the front yard. Standing with his father was Mr. Hashmi, the headmaster from the town school 10 kilometers away. Amir had seen him once before, during a special ceremony when an older boy from their village had won a district-level competition. "There he is," Khalid said, a hint of pride in his voice that Amir hadn't heard since before his mother's illness. Mr. Hashmi was a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He smiled at Amir and extended his hand. "Hello, young man. Your teacher, Mrs. Parveen, has told me many good things about you." Amir shook the headmaster's hand politely, feeling suddenly shy. "Thank you, sir." "Please come sit with us," Khalid invited, gesturing to the wooden bench beneath the shade of their old neem tree. "I'll bring some tea." As his father went inside to prepare the tea, Amir sat nervously beside the headmaster, wondering why such an important person would come all the way from town to see him. "I've heard about your mother," Mr. Hashmi said gently, "and about her wish for your education. I'm very sorry for your loss." Amir nodded, swallowing the lump that still formed in his throat whenever someone mentioned his mother. "Thank you, sir." "I've also heard something quite remarkable," the headmaster continued, "about how you never left your mother's coffin, and how you found what she had hidden for you. The whole district is talking about it." Amir looked up in surprise. "The whole district?" Mr. Hashmi smiled. "Word travels fast when it's a story worth telling. Your village imam contacted me last week. He told me about the scholarship fund they're starting, with you as the first recipient." Khalid returned with a tray of tea and joined them on the bench, listening intently as the headmaster explained his visit. "Our school has a special program for students who show exceptional promise," Mr. Hashmi said, accepting a cup of tea from Khalid. "We offer advanced classes and prepare them for university entrance exams. We would like to consider Amir for this program when he completes his primary education here." Khalid's hands trembled slightly as he set down his cup. "That's a great honor, sir, but I'm afraid even with the village scholarship, the daily travel to town would be—" "We have a small dormitory for students from outlying villages," Mr. Hashmi interrupted smoothly. "The cost is minimal, and there are additional scholarships available for families with financial need. Amir would come home on weekends." Amir felt his heart racing. The town school was known for its excellent teachers and modern facilities, things the small village school could never provide. It was the first step toward the future his mother had dreamed for him. I want to go, Baba, he said quietly but firmly. Khalid looked at his son, seeing in the boy's eyes the same determination that had kept him by his mother's coffin for those long hours. He nodded slowly. If that is what you want, we will find a way to make it happen. Mr. Hashmi smiled, satisfied. Excellent. Amir still has 2 years at the village school, which gives us plenty of time to prepare. I'll leave some materials for you both to look over. He reached into his bag and pulled out several brochures about the town school's programs. After the headmaster left, promising to stay in touch through Mrs. Parveen, Amir and his father sat together beneath the neem tree, looking through the colorful pages that showed classrooms with computers, a library filled with books, and a science laboratory. Your mother would be so proud, Khalid said softly. Do you think she knew? Amir asked. That something like this might happen if she left me that letter and the money? Khalid smiled. Your mother always believed education was the key to a better life. She couldn't have known exactly how things would unfold, but she planted the seed. He looked up at the branches of the neem tree above them. Just like we plant trees, not always knowing how tall they'll grow, but trusting that with proper care, they will reach toward the sky. News of Mr. Hashmi's visit spread through the village by the following day. Mrs. Parveen, Amir's teacher, was especially excited when he arrived at school the next morning. I've been telling the headmaster about your math abilities for months, she confided during the break period. But I think it was your story, your devotion to your mother and your determination to find what she left, that really caught his attention. Amir felt a strange mix of emotions at her words. He hadn't stayed by his mother's coffin to impress anyone or to become the subject of a story that traveled through the district. He had simply been a son keeping a promise to his beloved mother. That something good was coming from it felt both wonderful and slightly uncomfortable. After school that day, he stopped by his mother's grave, as had become his habit. The mound was now completely covered with wild grasses and flowers, looking less like a wound in the earth and more like a natural part of the cemetery landscape. People are talking about us, Mama, he said as he sat cross-legged beside the grave. They're saying I did something special by staying with you and finding your gift, but I was just doing what any son would do. He plucked a blade of grass, twirling it between his fingers. Now the town school wants me to join their special program. It's what you wanted, for me to get a good education. I just wish you were here to see it happen. A group of children playing nearby noticed Amir talking to the grave. Most kept their distance, but one boy, Taufik, whose family lived next door to the Hassans, approached cautiously. Who are you talking to? He asked. Amir looked up, not embarrassed. To be caught. My mother. Taufik nodded solemnly. He had lost his grandfather the previous year and understood something of death and remembrance. Does she answer? Amir considered the question thoughtfully. Not with words, he said finally. But sometimes I feel like she hears me. Taufik sat down beside him, keeping a respectful distance from the grave itself. Everyone's talking about you going to the town school, he said. My father says you'll be the first from our village to join their special program. I haven't gone yet, Amir pointed out. I still have 2 years here. Still, Taufik persisted. It's a big deal. My brother tried to get in last year, but they didn't accept him. There was no jealousy in his voice, just a matter-of-fact acknowledgement. Amir felt suddenly uncomfortable with the attention. I'm not smarter than your brother, he said. He trailed off, not sure how to explain. You just didn't give up, Taufik finished for him. That's what my father said. Even when people thought you were being strange, staying with your mother's coffin and then searching everywhere, you didn't give up. The simple truth of those words struck Amir deeply. He hadn't thought of his actions in those terms, but Taufik was right. He hadn't given up even when it seemed hopeless, even when people worried about his behavior. That evening, as Amir helped his father prepare dinner, he shared what Taufik had said. Khalid nodded thoughtfully as he chopped onions for the curry. Persistence is a rare quality, he said. Your mother had it too. When she decided something was important, nothing could change her mind. He smiled at a private memory. It's how she convinced me to marry her, even though my parents had someone else in mind. Amir looked up in surprise. He had never heard this story before. Really? Who did they want you to marry? Khalid chuckled. The daughter of my father's business partner. A sensible match, they said, but I had already given my heart to your mother, though I was too shy to tell her. Somehow she knew, and one day she simply told me that we would be getting married, and that she would convince both our families it was the right decision. And she did? Amir asked, fascinated by this glimpse of his mother as a young woman with dreams and determination. Of course she did. By the time she was finished talking to everyone, they all thought it had been their idea in the first place. Khalid's eyes grew misty with the memory. That's the kind of person your mother was. When she believed in something or someone, she never gave up. As the days passed, Amir found himself becoming something of a village celebrity. Parents pointed him out to their children as an example of what hard work and determination could achieve. Older students asked him for help with their studies. Even the village elders nodded respectfully when he passed. It was strange and sometimes uncomfortable, but Amir gradually came to understand that his story had given the village something. It needed hope. In a place where opportunities were limited and dreams often had to be set aside for practical realities, he had become a symbol of possibility. 1 month after finding his mother's gift, Amir stood in front of his classmates during the school's morning assembly. Mrs. Parveen had asked him to speak about the importance of education and perseverance. Looking out at the faces of children he had grown up with, some curious, some bored, some openly admiring, he took a deep breath. My mother once told me, he began in a clear voice that carried across the schoolyard, that knowledge is the one thing no one can ever take away from you. I didn't fully understand what she meant until recently. He paused, gathering his thoughts. Sometimes it seems easier to give up when things are difficult. But the most important things are worth fighting for, worth waiting for, worth searching for, even when others don't understand. From the back of the assembly, he saw his father watching, pride shining in his eyes. And for a brief, fleeting moment, Amir could almost see his mother standing beside him, her gentle smile encouraging him to continue. So when your studies seem too hard, or when you wonder if it's worth the effort, Amir concluded, remember that each piece of knowledge you gain is a treasure no one can steal. It's a gift you give yourself, and a gift you can one day share with others. As the assembly broke into applause, Amir knew that whatever the future held, the town school, perhaps university someday, and all the challenges that would come with them, he would face it with the same determination that had kept him by his mother's coffin. Not just for himself, but for his mother who had believed in him, for his father who supported him, and now for a village that looked to him with hope. The boy who didn't leave his mother's coffin had found not only what she had left behind, but also what she had always seen in him, the strength to persist, to believe, and to inspire others to do the same. 3 years had passed since the day Amir had refused to leave his mother's coffin. The small boy with tear-stained cheeks had grown into a lanky 10-year-old with thoughtful eyes and a quiet confidence. Today was a special day, his last at the village school before he would begin at the town school after the summer break. The classroom buzzed with excitement as Mrs. Parveen handed out end-of-year certificates. When she called Amir's name, the room erupted in applause. He walked to the front feeling a mix of pride and shyness, as his teacher presented him with not just a completion certificate but also a special award for academic excellence. Amir has achieved the highest marks in the history of our village school, Mrs. Parveen announced, her voice carrying over the clapping. We expect great things from him at the town school and beyond. From the back of the room where parents had gathered to watch the ceremony, Khalid beamed. In the 3 years since Fatima's death, he had transformed as well, channeling his grief into supporting his son's education. He had taken on extra tailoring work in the evenings, sewing clothes for wealthier families in neighboring villages to ensure Amir had everything he needed for school. After the ceremony, as children and parents mingled in the schoolyard sharing sweets and saying goodbyes, Imam Baksh approached Amir and Khalid. A moment of your time, the elderly religious leader said, gesturing them toward a quiet corner. I have news I wanted to share with you personally, before making a public announcement. Amir and his father exchanged curious glances before following the imam. As you know, Imam Baksh began once they were seated on a bench beneath a sprawling banyan tree. The scholarship fund we started for Amir has grown over these past years. What began as a small collection from village families has attracted attention from graduates of our village who have done well in the cities. Khalid nodded. The scholarship fund had indeed been a blessing, covering Amir's school supplies and the new clothes he needed as he grew taller, seemingly by the week. Yesterday, I received a letter from Dr. Yasin. The imam smiled at their reaction. Everyone in the village knew the story of Ahmed Yasin, a boy from a poor family who had studied by oil lamp and eventually earned a scholarship to medical school. Now a successful doctor in the capital city, he was the village's greatest success story. Until Amir, perhaps. Dr. Yasin heard about Amir's story from his parents, Imam Baksh continued. He was so moved that he has decided to expand the scholarship fund significantly. He wants to ensure that not only Amir's education is secured through university, if he chooses to go, but also to establish a permanent fund for other promising students from our village. Khalid's eyes widened in disbelief. Through university? But that's... He trailed off, unable to find words for such generosity. That's life-changing, Imam Baksh finished for him. Yes, it is, and there's more. Dr. Yasin has proposed that the fund be named after Fatima. At the mention of his mother's name, Amir felt a familiar tightness in his chest. Not the sharp pain of fresh grief, but a warm ache of remembrance. The Fatima Begum Education Fund, Imam Baksh said softly. He believes her story, her saving for her son's education despite their circumstances, and Amir's devotion to finding what she left, embodies the spirit of sacrifice and perseverance that education requires. Tears welled in Khalid's eyes. She would never have imagined. His voice broke. She just wanted our son to have a chance. Amir reached for his father's hand. Now other children will have a chance too, he said. Because of her. Later that afternoon, as the excitement of the day settled, Amir made his usual visit to the cemetery. The wild roses he had planted around his mother's grave the previous year had flourished, creating a living boundary that set the space apart. He sat in his familiar spot, legs crossed, and told his mother about the day's events as he always did. I wish you could have been there, Mama, he said, tracing patterns in the dirt with his finger. Mrs. Parveen gave me a special award, and everyone clapped so loudly. Baba was trying not to cry, but I could tell he was. A gentle breeze ruffled his hair, carrying the sweet scent of the roses. And there's something else, Amir continued, excitement creeping into his voice. Dr. Yasin, you remember Baba telling us stories about him when I was little? He's creating a big scholarship fund for kids from our village, and they're naming it after you. He paused, imagining how his mother would have reacted to the news. Probably, with embarrassment at first, then with quiet pride. So now when people talk about education in our village, they'll say your name. Kids who aren't even born yet will know who you were. Isn't that amazing? For a while, Amir sat in comfortable silence, watching the shadows lengthen across the cemetery grounds. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, carefully folded paper, his certificate from today. He had asked Mrs. Parveen for a second copy explaining his purpose. I brought this for you, he said, unfolding it and placing it against the simple headstone. He used small stones from the path to hold down the corners. I know it's silly because the rain will probably ruin it, but I wanted you to have it anyway. From the cemetery gates came the sound of approaching footsteps. Amir looked up to see Taufik, who had become his closest friend over the past years. I thought I'd find you here, Taufik said, joining Amir beside the grave. He noticed the certificate and nodded understanding. The two boys sat in companionable silence for a few minutes before Taufik spoke again. My father says the whole village is gathering at the mosque tonight. The imam has some big announcement. Amir smiled. I know what it is, he admitted. But I can't tell you, you'll have to wait and see. Taufik accepted this with good grace. Fine, keep your secrets. Anyway, I came to ask if you want to come to our house for dinner. My mother made your favorite, lamb biryani. The invitation was tempting, especially since Taufik's mother was the best cook in the village, but Amir shook his head. Thanks, but I promised Baba I'd help him finish my new clothes for school. The headmaster is coming tomorrow to discuss the dormitory arrangements. Taufik stood, brushing dirt from his pants. I still can't believe you're going to live in town. Promise you won't forget about us village kids when you become a famous doctor or engineer or whatever. Amir laughed. I'll only be home on weekends, not moving to another planet. He got to his feet as well, taking a last look at the certificate by the headstone. Race you to the bottom of the hill? The boys took off running, their laughter carrying on the evening air. That night, the small mosque was packed with villagers curious about Imam Baksha's announcement. Children squirmed on mats at the front, while adults filled every available space behind them. Amir and his father sat near the front, already knowing what was to come but excited to see the village's reaction. When Imam Baksh finally revealed the news about the Fatima Begum Education Fund, a ripple of astonished murmurs ran through the crowd. For many in the village, university education had seemed like an impossible dream, something for wealthy city families, not for farmers and craftsmen's children. Dr. Yassin believes, the Imam concluded, that what began with one mother's sacrifice and one son's devotion should continue as our village's legacy. Education is how we honor the past while building the future. After the announcement, people surged forward to congratulate Khalid and Amir. Women who had known Fatima wiped tears from their eyes, remembering her quiet determination. Men who had once whispered concerns about Amir's behavior around the coffin now clasped Khalid's shoulder with respect. Your wife planted a seed that will grow for generations, one elderly farmer told Khalid, his weathered face solemn. There is no greater gift to a community. The following morning, Mr. Hashmi arrived from the town school as planned. He sat with Amir and Khalid in their front room, reviewing the dormitory rules and the schedule for the new term. As they talked, Amir noticed the headmaster glancing occasionally at the small table in the corner, where Fatima's metal box sat alongside a framed photograph of her. That's her, isn't it? Mr. Hashmi asked eventually. The mother in the story everyone's talking about. Khalid nodded, his expression softening as it always did when he looked at his wife's picture. Yes, that's Fatima. Mr. Hashmi studied the photograph thoughtfully. When Imam Baksh first told me about Amir staying by his mother's coffin, I thought it was just a touching village tale, the kind people tell to make sense of grief. But now I understand it was something more. He turned to Amir. It was the beginning of a much bigger story. Amir considered this idea as they continued their meeting. By the time Mr. Hashmi left, promising to return in 2 weeks to escort Amir to his new school, the sun was high overhead, flooding the small house with golden light. Baba, Amir said as they washed the teacups together. Do you think Mama knew what would happen? Not just about me finding the money, but everything else. The scholarship, the fund with her name, all of it. Khalid dried his hands on a worn cloth and put an arm around his son's shoulders. Your mother wasn't a fortune teller, he said with a small smile.